Hey guys, this is Eric Weingartner with Weingartner Racing. Today's video is about these Dart imitation heads. These are Chinese, but they go by about 1,000 different names. I'll name a few. If you get the Assault Head, the NKB, DNA, AFR Enforcer, they're all the same head. There's some small differences between the brands, but for the most part, they're the same. And only small differences, usually it's in the valve train itself. Now, I ordered these heads bare and I ported them, and that's what I'm going to share with you today. They're going to be assembled with parts I'm going to use, and I'll share that with you too, just so you can get an idea of what all went on. Now, these heads, these are small block Chevy, obviously, but they come in two configurations as far as spark plugs. You can get angled or straight. These ones are actually straight plugs, but you can get them in angled. They also have some castings, like the AFRs do. They have a steam hole that would be right here and right about here, if I remember right, for theirs, but not all of them do, so this one doesn't. So beyond that, as far as the chamber, the actual port, intake port and exhaust port, they're so close. The valve jobs are actually about the same as well. Now, I went pretty much all out on these. I shouldn't say all out, but relatively close to all out. There's some limitations I have in the head, which I'll discuss, that prevented me from going further, but let's go ahead and talk about it. So when you get the heads, they'll have a 202 intake valve. They are now a 208 intake valve. So this is a 208 and this is a 1600 just from stock. So I redid the valve job on both of them, but of course I cut this one out to a 208 intake valve. You can't go larger, so a good question on that would be, can you go larger? No, you can't, because you're running out of seat. The seat's only so big, and if you did, part of your the angle would be on the aluminum, which you can't really do. So 208 is about the biggest you can go. This is a 45-degree valve job, and I'll tell you why I picked that. The chamber itself actually lays down from the top cut, so it's deeper in. And when you do like a 50-degree valve job, which I would like to do on this, because this is actually going to be used with a 700 lift camshaft, you'll have a steeper or a taller top cut. So for instance, this one's a 37-degree top cut on the 45. My 50 is like a 40, and I've got one that's 42 as well. Neither one would come in unless you really sank down the valve job down. And this might go over some of your head, but what I'm trying to say is you're going to cut it until it gets the top cut in. With this, because the way the chambers are, I picked the 45 just because it's got less angle on the top cut. So what's the 45 versus 50? Well, typically a 45-degree valve job will flow better at the lower lifts, say 300 and under. 400 and under, they usually flow better, the 45 does. At 500, it's typically ties a 50-degree valve job, and from 600 up, the 50 degree is usually better. Being that this guy's gonna have a 700 lift camshaft, it probably would have made more power, but I did the 45. So, and I'll share the results. Now, the couple things I don't like about it as far as porting-wise goes, these, not really don't like, the material that come with these seats, whether it be AFR, Enforcers, or any of the others, they're all kind of soft. So when you get them, they're really shiny, but truthfully, they're a softer metal. So when I go cutting at a slower speed, they kind of look dull, which I'm not a huge fan of. It's just the way it is. You might say, why don't you just cut at a higher speed? In other words, when you're cutting it, it goes like this when it's cutting. If you go really fast, it'll make them pretty shiny. The catch is they're not as round. So I usually slow down the speed to get them nice and round. You see how it's got a little divot here? This is because I'd have to dig this out to get this out. So it looks like there's a lip there, and there is, but it's because this is kind of dug in. So I guess I could fix that, but I don't really want to, because it makes for a weird chamber. In other words, it goes from here, then dug in, then comes back up to exit. I don't like that. It does kind of help though in reversion though, just for the record. You might say, well, doesn't it create a hot spot? Yeah, I guess, but that's not creating near as much a hot spot as some other areas. So in other words, reversion, the air is coming back this way. When it's trying to come back in, it hits this lip, makes it worse for it flow-wise. So I guess it's kind of there. I guess if I really wanted to dig in here and get this out, I could. But like I said, it makes for a really weird shape. Down, then up. Ugh. Anyway, to let you know on that. The chambers themselves, these are an imitation of the darts. They look like the darts. The Dart 200cc Platinum has what this has been copied from. That's what this chamber is. Now, I will say this chamber is not the greatest at certain areas. For instance, because it's hard to see from a camera, but it's really close to the valve in this range right here. So in this range, you're into the 1, 2, 3, about 400 lift range. You're right in this area. Well, it's actually pretty tight to the valve. So if you take like a Brodix chamber, for instance, the spark plug's kind of moved away and this whole area here is kind of backed out. And what that does is it also, this is curved in and cut in, it allows the more area for the air to get around the valve and out. So typically this chamber does not flow as good, especially at 400 lift, as compared to like a Brodix or a Profiler chamber where it's more coming this way and more out of the way. So there's less stuff in the way. So just something to think about. It doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, but because of the way it works like this and how this is here, it actually has less swirl than my Brodix heads that flow the same by about 1,000 RPM on my swirl meter. Not that you may or may not want to know that, but I'm just going to tell you. So let's look at some of the other parts. Here are the intake ports. They are, this has been matched to a 1206. This has a 2.5 pinch area. These are about 225 cc's all said and done. By the way, you can run either intake manifold if you wanted. I don't know why you would, but you can. This is passenger because I also poured an intake manifold to go with it. And then this is the exhaust ports. They've been opened up a little bit. And now I'll show you the results as far as flow-wise go. I'll tell you too, I floated on a 4030 bore and also on a 4155 bore. And I floated on both my benches just so I get a better idea. But let me go ahead and share those results with you so I can get you guys on your way. Here are the flow numbers. Now this is the 4030 bore, and in case you're wondering, that's like a 350 bore that's bored 30 over, or your 383. These are actually going on a 383, so that's the reason why I chose it for that bore size. So these are the ported numbers. I didn't flow it stock, but I'll go ahead and tell you, if you look at my video, check a few videos before and look for that AFR Enforcer one, you'll see it there. It flowed about 270 stock, so it beats that at 5. So here we are at 4030 bore, 236 at 4, 302 at 6, and then it peaks at 316 at 900 lift. And then it kind of trails off. The exhaust, pretty good. 178 at 4, good number there. 220 at 6, great number there. And peaking at 236. So overall, as far as flow-wise goes, that's not bad. So you might say, well, that's not as good as I thought it'd be. These numbers are pretty good for a 4030 bore. Because typically when you flow on a smaller bore, they flow less. And I'm going to show you the results from a bigger bore here in a second. But I wanted to show you that just because, I mean, those are still very strong numbers, especially on the exhaust side, which kind of shocked me. But anyway, let's look at it float on the Superflow bench and with the different bore size. I'm doing this real quick off camera so you can stare at the head so I don't give up the customer's name. There we go. This is a 4030 bore right here, sorry. This cylinder number 2, that's what this one is. Let me pull it down just a bit, there we go. Cylinder number 2, this is from the Superflow 750 flow bench. The other ones were from the Sanes 680. The numbers actually look pretty close when you compare the two. This is a 4030 bore, and in this one it says 239, 303, maxing at 316. Very close to Superflow. Exhaust, not so much. 174, 206, that's like almost 14 lower than the Sanes, and 229. Now, this is a 4155 bore. So this whole column here is 4155 bore. This is a 4030 bore. Look how much it picks up with the bigger bore. The valve gets unshrouded, and man, it makes a difference. It only gains about 3 CFM at 400 lift, but look, quite a bit there, and 7 CFM at 6, that's a great gain. And at our peak, it's about 10 CFM. So we went from a 316 to a 327. That's right, this thing, if you're putting this on the 400 and you ported it like I did, and you're like, why don't you show us how to do that? Go back and look at how I ported the assault heads and then make them bigger. And you'll get these numbers, 327, that's a really good number. Exhaust is a little bit better too at 232 on the bigger bore. So it definitely likes the bigger bore, much better for that. Hopefully you get something out of this video. I just try to share how these can be made very good. And as far as any of the small block heads that are out there, to my knowledge, besides Procom, these are the cheapest heads you can buy, even the Vortec heads. So for instance, these used to be pre-COVID, or pre-inflation, I should say. You used to be able to pick these up for about $400 for a pair bare. Now they are probably more than that, but still, Probably one of the cheapest heads you can get, and they look at the capabilities of them as far as port-wise, when you really get after it, 327 CFM. If you're curious to want to know what I did, you can look back at those assault videos, see exactly what I've done, except for I really just made it bigger on this one. So this one's definitely got more bowl. The bowl itself's bigger, the area over the short side's bigger, the short side's laid back more. So it's definitely bigger, but it's the same principles, and should be a really good head, especially for the price it is. So anyway, if you have questions about how I ported it or what you did, put it in the comments and I'll try to answer when I get some free time. And let me show you real quick, because I told you I was going to talk about the valve train, just what valves I used in it. I'm going to show them real quick, because I know you guys got stuff to do. One more quick thing I wanted to mention before I forget, which I clearly did. The one benefit to this head is you can flat mill these down and get this combustion chamber much smaller. Because here's how I usually tell how much I can really flat mill. Two areas I'll look at: the distance between the top cut here and the deck. And if you look at how much aluminum is available here, right here, let me get my pointer. Here. So, I mean, the top cut's really like to here, and this continues on. That's what I mean by it's dug in. But because it's out kind of ways, there's still quite a bit of distance here. And then here, this distance. I've already milled off 10, and the reason why I milled off 10, you might ask why, it's because I was trying to match another head. This is a replacement head for one that got damaged. But what I'm trying to tell you is you can actually flat mill quite a bit off these before you have any times the issue where it's trying to get into the seat, or it could cut up too much of your top cut. And you could probably mill quite a bit without it getting too close where there's not enough area here to seal and get the chambers pretty small. My guess is you probably could get around a 60 on a flat mill without having to angle mill with this head, which that's pretty good. It's only really because, though, it's got a smaller seat and it's kind of sunk in. But anyway, just a little bit of extra thing for you. Some people may not recommend doing that. Most people just stick with the 64. These are actually going to like 63, if I remember right. And it's just because that's what it had to be to match the other head. And there's still, I mean, clearly plenty of room. So something to think about. You guys take care. Here are the valve train parts I'm going to use for the head. This is the intake valve, a 208. This is from Ferrea. This is a part number 6203, and I believe that's a 6202. Let me double check up here in the top. I believe I'm right. Yeah, 6203. So this is 6203, 6202. Ferrea, by the way, has 3 valve grades they use. They have a 5000 series, which if you're running a solid roller, I don't recommend. They have a 6000 series, which is made for solid roller stuff, and they have the Comp Plus version. This is the in-between versions, but I am going to warn you, I'm probably going to end up switching to Rev stuff. Rev makes valves just because Ferrea's gone up so much that it's not cost effective. It's becoming more expensive. But if you're wanting Ferrea, because to me, Ferrea really does make the best stainless steel valves. They're just getting very expensive. It's hard to make any money with them. Then you get them. However, if you get these valves, you need to take them to a machine shop because they don't have a back cut. So you need to put a back cut on it. So even though it says it's 8.5 thousandths wide, that's how much you put on the grinder when you're grinding. This is just a 30-degree back cut on it. You have to do it because they don't come with a back cut, just letting you know. And you only need to do it on the intake side. So that's the valves. Another thing is get a longer valve. So this is 5060 long. And I point that out because these spring pads on your heads here are raised up enough where if you try to use a shorter length valve, unless you're doing something that a spring that requires a shorter installed height, you really can't. You'll have some issues. Speaking of which, this is the spring I'm using. This is a Pack 1941. It's sold by Brodix. It's reasonably priced. I can't tell you the price because it's going to go up by the time I mention it, but it's a reasonably priced solid roller valve spring. But one of the great things about it, it's got a lower installed height at about 9. So using with this stuff, it will fit, which is great, and it'll be good up to a 700 lift. These are also the retainers. I get these from Brodix as well. They're reasonably priced for titanium, but they keep going up as well, so they may not be reasonable by the time you actually watch this video. Anyway, that's the valve train parts. Hope that helps you just as a bonus, just as a little nugget of knowledge. Make sure you get a longer length. These are 5060 longs. Just really make sure you do that if you're doing a solid roller. Hydraulic roller stuff, they have a shorter installed height. You probably can get away with a shorter valve, but if you're trying to do a solid roller, which a lot of people are, go with a longer valve. Just letting you know. All right, you guys take care.